Boys, we are back, and we are diving into another rookie mock draft with landing spots. This time we are looking at Matt Miller's mock draft. That link will be in the description below, as well as the pinned comment where you can find that mock draft. If you want to find all these picks, we are going to kind of run through them as much as we can. But before we get into it, be sure to check out patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind. Get in on that free 7-day trial. Hop in the Discord. Check out some bonus podcasts while you're there as well. Be sure you like the video if you enjoyed it. Comment on some players we maybe missed. Landing spots you loved, hated, what landing spots are you hoping for your favorite prospects, and so on. With that said, I just want to preview their first round really quick. We had Caleb Williams going to Chicago, Jaden Daniels going to Washington, Drake May to Minnesota, J.J. McCarthy to Denver, Marvin Harrison to Los Angeles, the Chargers, Malik Neighbors going to the Giants of New York, Rome Odunze going to Chicago, Brock Bowers to the New York Jets, Brian Thomas to the Arizona Cardinals, Bo Nix to the Las Vegas Raiders, Adonai Mitchell going to Buffalo, the McConkey Tonk heading to Baltimore. Nate, you're welcome. And we see Xavier Worthy go to Kansas City. And then we will kind of, as we go along, we'll touch on the best remaining available and go from there. But Mike, we gifted you the first pick overall. And a lot of this was not to give you practice, but because you, between all three of us so far, have had the most contention, let's say, of who to go with at the first overall pick. Mm-hmm. You've had Marvin Harrison a couple times. You've kind of leaned towards Caleb. What are you going with now that we have a landing spot on the name? Who do you got at your 101?
Bob, you did make a good note here. You said make this pick like it's the only pick you have in the draft. So if there was a circumstance where the 101 was the only pick that you had, sometimes it's best to think, where can I maximize my value? And it may not be the player you like the most. So if I had multiple picks in this draft, Marvin Harrison Jr. would have been my pick. However, I did go with Caleb Williams, who went to the Chicago Bears. That's where everyone's speculating it's going to happen. It seems more likely day after day, painted nails or not, whatever. But the fact of the matter is, you could probably turn around and move Caleb Williams for Marvin Harrison Jr. at some point. That being said, I'm excited to see what he brings to the table in Chicago. He does have some fumble issues. We know that. But, guys, that could be corrected. Tiki Barber had fumble issues when he was a running back. That was corrected later in his career. The same thing can be said for Caleb Williams. The fact of the matter is, Lincoln Riley is a good coach. The coaching he will get in the NFL will be better than he got at USC and Oklahoma. So Caleb Williams at the 101. And I believe it is to you, Nate.
Yes, it is. And I'm taking Marvin Harrison here. He goes to the Chargers, and you put the top wide receiver prospect in this draft with a top quarterback like Justin Herbert. I know that Jim Harbaugh might be running an offense out of the 1960s, but there's no competition there outside of Josh Palmer and whatever Quentin Johnston's going to do for us this year. Marvin Harrison would go in here, be the absolute number one target. You know, I don't know what the full volume would be, but if there's any relevant, like, average volume in Los Angeles for this team, you're looking at a guy that's going to see 140 targets. So Marvin Harrison, he would have year one, top 12 potential in this landing spot. And then from there, it's just all money. So I'm taking Marvin Harrison here. It's a very easy pick, I think. There's other quarterbacks that you can look at here, but Marvin Harrison is just, there's that top two, and we've picked them.
And I agree. I had that same mindset of that's what I would have gone with at 102, even though I love my 103 pick. I went with Drake May, who went to the Minnesota Vikings. Just a slew of tools behind him, enough talent around him that, again, not a guy who has to play hero ball, can play his game and really play to his strengths. Doesn't have to, able to play in a quarterback-friendly system with Kevin O'Connell as well. I love this pick. I love I like the player enough here. Last week, Nate and I, it was J.J. McCarthy went to the Minnesota, and that was the Minnesota landing spot is just by far the best landing spot there is for quarterback. And, you get that full complement of weapons. Like we mentioned, you're going to have year one production because your quarterback has year one weapons. It's a great build around him. And Mike, I love your next pick as well here at the 104. Who'd you go with?
So I think people are going to think that this pick might not be so good. They might think the landing spot's a little gross, but I went with Malik Neighbors going to the New York Giants. Here's the thing. The NFL and the fantasy community, there are some parallels there. In the NFL, your team can get better in one draft. The same thing with fantasy football. I don't want to foreshadow too much, but if you look at the skill positions that the New York Giants got in this mock draft, their team got substantially better. Malik Neighbors, look, somebody has to be the number one wide receiver in the Giants, and we've seen Daniel Jones have good years before if he's the guy or if it's the quarterback that gets drafted a little bit later. So Malik Neighbors, I'm all in, and sometimes a good wide receiver prospect could turn around a bad history of drafting wide receivers. Devonta Smith did the same thing for the Philadelphia Eagles. They were not good at drafting wide receivers. Drafted him. He turned things around. Malik Damers at the 104. Lock it in for me.
Yeah, I like that pick a lot, Mike. Here at the 105, I went with Jaden Daniels, who went to the Washington Commanders at the 2nd overall pick. I think that this is a really nice pairing between Daniels and Cliff Kingsbury. I think that's an offense that could run really well for fantasy football, especially. And this is a team that's going to be playing from behind a lot. This is not the Commanders defense that we saw, 2-3 years ago where they had a really good defense. They've moved a lot of those pieces at this point, and they are kind of rebuilding that defense. So Jaden Daniels, throwing Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, I think this would be a fun offense. It would be productive. And Jaden Daniels, with his ability to make things happen on the ground, he's always going to give you a lot of potential week in and week out. I like this landing spot for him a bit more than if he fell to 3, actually. So I'm pretty excited to take him at the 105. You're getting a really good quarterback with a ton of upside.
My chief concern here would be the offensive line in front of him. And he has some weapons, which is nice, some reliable weapons. They add some in this draft as well. Spoiler alert. Not that we're going to maybe talk about him. Maybe we will. I don't know. Don't want to spoil too much. But don't hate the pick there. I think, at the end of the day, we always have to make picks sometimes based on how we believe a draft is going to play out. And I think at this point, Jaden Daniels is a pretty smash pick for most at 105. Even if I don't love the pick or the player there, most drafts, I think he's gone at 105. I'm going to go with and take the wide receiver value that fell to 106. Rome Odunze coming out as an absolute stud. If you follow Matt Harmon, highly recommend, if you don't, checking out his reception perception. Rome Odunze, one of the highest graded wide receivers he's ever had. Just an absolute winner on the route tree. Going here to again be, maybe not wide receiver 1 from day one, which, is going to depreciate his value that little bit. But you look at the long-term picture, DJ Moore, at the end of the day, in my opinion, is and always will be a better wide receiver 2 on a team than he is a 1. He thrived as a 1 last year. Don't get me wrong. But at the end of the day, it's okay to just be a really good wide receiver 2. And I think that's what he is. I think Odunze eventually ascends to that wide receiver 1 role, targets wise, production wise. So I took him here with the 106, despite going to Chicago and playing alongside a lot of competitive pieces, or a lot of, kind of a crowded wide receiver room, and with a rookie quarterback. But I'm looking at the long-term picture at the 106. Mike, what do you got at 107?
I do want to say, too, looking at the long-term picture at the 106 is a good thing to think about. You're drafting at the 106, so that's kind of a middle-of-the-pack team. You have some flexibility. You probably have some good players on your team, but you do need to think about the future as well. At the 107, I'm going to go, I know, big shocker, I'm taking the first tight end off the board, but look, it's Brock Bowers going to the New York Jets. Coming in there, you got Garrett Wilson, I think Alan Lazard as wide receivers. So the wide receiver core is not great there, but Brock Bowers, I think he could be relevant. Aaron Rodgers could definitely use him as a weapon. We know Aaron Rodgers in the past has not trusted rookies, but the difference between him and other rookies, Brock Bowers, great hands. He's going to catch almost everything thrown his way. The Jets are not a scary landing spot anymore, I don't think, like they used to be. So at the 107, I'm taking Brock Bowers, although I do think if it was a tight end premium, he might have went maybe a little bit higher, possibly. Yeah. So Brock Bowers, 107. Nate, back to you.
I think that's a really good pick. I think, Bowers at the 107 is a great value. At the 108, I looked at other positions here because of positional value, but with Brian Thomas Jr. going to the Arizona Cardinals to be the wide receiver 1 for Kyler Murray, I could not pass up on this opportunity to take Brian Thomas at the 108. Marquise Brown's with the Chiefs now. The Cardinals wide receiver room is now Michael Wilson and Greg Dortch. So Brian Thomas walks in there. He walks in as the wide receiver 1. And, he scored 13 touchdowns this year in the SEC. He is able to get down the field and be a threat to test defenses. He can also create yards after catch. He's not quite in that top 3 wide receiver group, but he's a really good 4th in this class. And picking up at the 108 when he has the opportunity that he would have in this landing spot, I think you're going to get year-one production from him, and he could end up being, a top 20 wide receiver very quickly in Dynasty.
I agree with that, and I agree with the point you made about, possibly looking around at other positions. I honestly believe that the player you picked, the person I picked, and the player that Mike picked are all almost in a similar tier where you can kind of take a grab bag shot at any of the 3, and it's pretty similar values, pretty similar production or opportunity going forward. I decided to go quarterback. I couldn't let this quarterback slide down the board anymore. I went J.J. McCarthy, who went to Denver, and at the end of the day, I think J.J. McCarthy is still slept on by some because of the lack of production. And I'm a sucker for production more than probably anybody I know. I love seeing college production. Didn't see that with McCarthy, but you have to take the context into the situation where so many games he didn't play the full game. He was taken out of games. The game script was against him in a way where he's not throwing 40 times a game. He's only has to throw, less than 20 times a game. But performance on third downs, performance just in general, good player, doesn't turn the ball over. I'm taking J.J. McCarthy. He went to Denver, albeit not an awesome tool landing spot with the players around him. Hopeful that, Marvin Mims comes around to what you guys believed he could be. I'm not a huge Marvin Mims guy, but hopefully that offense can get a little better. Hopefully we see the ascension of Javonte Williams to turn things around as well. But kicking it to you, Mike, with your next pick. Love this pick. Talk about him.
Bob, I do want to just say that I was really hoping that J.J. McCarthy was going to get to me here. So when I saw you take him, I was like, And for the record, you said, or I forget who said it at this point. Sorry, I'm old. The Drake May landing spot to Minnesota was good. I actually think the Denver landing spot for J.J. McCarthy is pretty good too. I do think Marvin Mims comes around. We got Cortland Sutton out there who's kind of been quarterback proof his entire career. Maybe Greg Dulcich can stay healthy. Got Javonte Williams. So Denver isn't as bare as people may believe, but there's also still a lot of question marks there too. Yeah. That's the only problem. That being said, I'm taking the first running back off the board. Jonathan Brooks to Dallas. Nate, you've been pretty vocal. You said that the guys that did his surgery work for the Dallas Cowboys staff. Seems like a match made in heaven. And at the 110, if you're drafting at the 110, unless you trade for this is your straight up pick. You were a good team. I'm assuming you have some other good running back pieces. So if Jonathan Brooks doesn't start the season right away, maybe you could go try to get Rico Dowdle, who's the number 1 running back on the depth chart for the Dallas Cowboys right now. Probably get him cheap. You could play him a little bit till it's Brooks' time to shine. These are moves that you got to make to be competitive. But Nate, let's kick it back to you. Spoiler alert, he loves this guy. Bob, what's up?
Real quick, I just wanted to clarify that Jonathan Brooks was a second-round pick.
My apologies.
Our first second-round pick, first day 2 pick. All good. Just wanted to get that in there. Nate, talk about this next guy. We both love this player.
Yeah, I was looking to get Jonathan Brooks here, to be honest, but Mike snipes me. I totally get it, though. I would be picking him at the 110 as well, but that gave me the opportunity at the 111 to pick up the last first-round quarterback, and I'm very excited about this. It's Bo Nix, who you guys know, we're all pretty excited about him. I've been excited about him for a year now, talking about him as a first-rounder last year going into this season, and he goes to the Las Vegas Raiders. Not necessarily my favorite landing spot, but he's a first-round pick. He's throwing the ball to Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers. I think this is overall a pretty decent landing spot. And with a first-round quarterback who's going to have good weapons to throw to, you can't let him get out of the first round in your rookie drafts. So I picked him up at the 111. And, he's probably like your quarterback 3 or your quarterback 4 if you're the 111. So that's a really nice spot to have a developmental quarterback who's a first-rounder.
Are you concerned that they signed Gardner Minshew, or do you think it's just a matter of time until Bo Nix takes?
Yeah, I think it'd just be like a slight bridge. Maybe ideally for overall development, like Bo wouldn't start the first week of the season. I don't think the Raiders are playoff contenders. So I don't think they're going to be looking to week 1. We got to make sure we win all of our games and get there. I mean, they're always going to try to win, of course. And Gardner Minshew probably gives them the best chance in the beginning of the season. But I think Bo would take over by midway or something like that.
I tend to agree that would be probably best for his development, but I don't think that lasts too long. I think, enough Gardner Minshew fun and people will be shouting for Bo Nix before too long. And hey, I'd love to see it. And we'd be so lucky to get this lineup of quarterbacks out of the first round and the top half of the first round, no less. We'd be pretty excited about it. But talking about the back half of the first round, I know that there's no chance with a wide receiver going to Kansas City that they would last much longer. I went Xavier Worthy. Whether he should or should not be picked here is not for debate. This is where he will start going in drafts. If the Kansas City Chiefs are the landing spot, end of the first round, middle of the first round, doesn't matter where. If it's the Chiefs, if it's a wide receiver, first round with Worthy's speed and excitement, ability, whatever, he's going there. I do like Xavier Worthy, and I think this would be an awesome offense to get into for him. I'd be very confident in his skill set being used appropriately, where he's not just going to be a deep threat guy. That's not going to be his only part of the game. He can get involved on screens, slants, the whole 9 and not just the 9. So I'd be a fan of this pick regardless, but I think I can't see anybody after this going before him, in my opinion. But before we get into what goes after him, let's talk about some players, the best remaining players on the board. I'll go in order. I'll just talk through the second round of the draft, let's say. So the best available remaining, we have Adonai Mitchell, who went to the Buffalo Bills in the first round, Ladd McConkey going to Baltimore in the first round, and then we are done with first-round players after that. Round 2, we have Xavier Legette going to Carolina, Keon Coleman going to New England, Roman Wilson going to New Orleans, Michael Penix going to the New York Giants, Ricky Pearsall going to Cincinnati, Malachi Corley going to Pittsburgh, Devontae Walker going to Philly, and Troy Franklin going to Detroit. Mike, I'm kicking it to you. You are leading off this first round with the 201. I was surprised with this pick, if I'm being honest. What do you got?
Talent wins out, man. And I just think right now, Troy Franklin is more talented than Jameson Williams. Jameson Williams at this point, by the way, Troy Franklin going to the Detroit Lions. I should preface that. He's been a disappointment in his career. We knew that he would take a little bit coming off that injury, which he did. He flashed a little bit. Then he had the suspension, and it was a bit of a slow start from there. But the fact of the matter is Josh Reynolds, who's now with Denver, was pretty relevant sometimes last year. So there is enough target share there. Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta, I think, are going to be your two main guys in Detroit. Jared Goff has shown that he could support more than that. I think after that, it's Troy Franklin. And for me right now, at this point in his career, Jameson Williams is a better best ball play than a straight-up dynasty play. So the 201, I'm going Troy Franklin. I've been a vocal supporter of his since early in the process. So I'm taking him here at the beginning of the second round. And Nate, it's back to you at the 2-2.
Yeah, and at the 2-2, I'm picking up another first-round wide receiver. I'm picking up Ladd McConkey, who went to the Baltimore Ravens. I think if Ladd McConkey is a first-round pick, that is a great value because, Zay Flowers is there. I understand there's not maybe the ideal landing spot for a guy like Ladd, but I think that connection with Lamar, how they would use him in the Todd Monken offense to get him the ball, give him opportunities to create yards after the catch. I don't think we're looking at an offense where Zay Flowers and Ladd McConkey are competing for the wide receiver 1 spot. I think this would be an offense where they're kind of 1A and 1B. I think that's how this offense is going to kind of spread the ball around. And with that, I think there's value in it, especially an offense that's going to score a lot of touchdowns, move the ball really well. So Ladd McConkey, the 202, I'm happy with this pick because you guys know I love Ladd. So going to the Ravens, being a first-round pick, being able to pick him up in the second round, I love this value.
I do want to say, too, Ladd McConkey, the nice thing, that connection to the Todd Monken offense as well, just having played under the Todd Monken offense or within that system at Georgia, I think gives him a bit of a leg up in this regard as well.
Todd Monken actually has a Ladd McConkey role in his offense, so Ladd McConkey could fill that Ladd McConkey role.
Who better than to play the role of Ladd McConkey than Ladd McConkey playing himself in the Baltimore special? But I went with, at the 203, the player who I thought you were going to take at the 202, and I thought I was going to have to take Ladd McConkey. But hey, it all works out. I'm not a huge fan of this player, but at this point, it's another pick where there's no way I think he sits on the board after this. The last remaining first-round wide receiver, first-round player, Adonai Mitchell going to Buffalo. I mean, how quickly is it that everyone's shouting from the rooftops that, he's going to supplant Stephon Diggs year one. He's going to be the new wide receiver 1 in the offense. And maybe that's a long-term picture for sure. But I have some concerns with this. He's somebody who's admitted to kind of taking plays off. And that's something you don't like to see from a mental aspect of the game and whatnot. And a lot of, some concerns for me and whatnot, but I'm taking him here anyway. I think it's a fair enough value at this point. I don't think, not that I love him, but I don't think he's sitting on the board here because the Buffalo landing spot is too appealing. So I'm soaking up the value, I guess, at 203.
Yeah, I think that's a really good pick. I really consider him for the 202. Adonai Mitchell coming into the Gabe Davis role. I think he's going to fulfill that role better than Gabe Davis did, even though Gabe Davis was actually pretty productive, just a little inconsistent.
Mike, to you with your pick, this one was surprising because another player I don't love, but hey, you like him enough to take him here. What do you got?
Sometimes it's about opportunity over talent too, and this player has a lot of talent. I do want to say, as of the fantasy community as a whole, Bob, I want to touch on what you were saying. A.D. Mitchell could take over Stephon Diggs' wide receiver 1 role. Guys, we got to stop this. Stephon Diggs is a better wide receiver than the Buffalo Bills offense than A.D. Mitchell is going to be right now. Can he do it? Yes. Is it going to be this year or next year? Probably not. That being said, let's get to my pick. We're going to Pittsburgh. Malachi Corley from Western Kentucky. Because if you look at their depth chart, it is George Pickens and then a hot steaming pile of cast-offs and garbage, namely Van Jefferson, Quez Watkins, Denzel Mims, Dez Fitzpatrick. Oh my goodness. Bury it all under where Three River Stadium used to be. I mean, he's going to come in right away. Malachi Corley, he could come right in the slot, bump Quez Watkins out of there because there's one thing he could do that Quez Watkins can't, and that is catch the football, and he's extremely physical after the catch. So in this case, do I think it's a little bit high? Yes, but Bob, if it's the only pick in the draft, I want a guy who I think is going to get opportunity right off the rip from day one and can be fairly productive. Malachi Corley at the 204. By the way, Nate, I considered the guy you picked, and I'll touch on why I didn't after you take it. But who are you talking about next?
I was pissed, by the way.
Were
And
you?
almost every pick throughout the rest of the draft, I was like, okay, Nate, I was looking to take that, but whatever. I guess I'll take the
Well, next time you got to
sloppy
give yourself
seconds.
the second pick instead of the third pick. Bob.
Yeah, that's the plan.
Pick behind
I
me.
mean, I'm definitely not going to pick behind Nate ever again, but go ahead and talk in this pick, Nate. It's a good one. Go ahead.
From here on in the draft, I'm just picking up great value. You know, you guys are letting value fall down the board, and I'm just picking up great value. And for some reason, we're now in the second round, and we haven't seen a running back go off the board yet. I mean, I know, hey, we got 2 first-rounders there. We got Troy Franklin and Malachi Corley, who are talented
What
in
about
their
my
own
pick
right.
in the first round, Nate, at the 110?
Yeah, well, I'm
Haven't
talking
seen
about the
much
second
since.
round.
Oh, sorry, my bad. You just said
But we have other day 2 running backs. And you guys know me. I'm not the one that's going to be overdrafting running backs. I'm usually pretty against drafting running backs. But when I get opportunities to draft day 2 running backs in the second round in good opportunities, I'm going to take that. So here we have Jalen Wright going to the Bengals. Okay. I know it's a little bit of a crowded backfield with Zach Moss and Chase Brown. And I was actually pretty back and forth with this pick. And spoiler alert, of the player that I was considering for this pick, I got to pick with my next pick. So it really worked out. You have a guy like Jalen Wright who has all the upside in the world athletically and is a good receiver. And he goes into this offense where all he's got to do is beat out Zach Moss and Chase Brown. Now, does he do that like right away in preseason? I don't think so. Those guys are veterans. They have been on the NFL field before. I don't think they're scrubs, but it would probably only be a matter of time. I mean, Jalen Wright here, what is a second round pick? No, he's a third round pick, 80th overall. Day 2 running backs. That's what I stick to. Day 2 running backs. That's where the upside, the production is usually found. And not just that, but also the investment long term, which with running backs is so hard to find right now. So Jalen Wright being a day 2 running back, being that I can pick him up in the middle of the second round and get somebody that can give me running back depth for years to come in a good offense, I can't pass up this opportunity. So Jalen Wright at the 205, I thought was one of my favorite picks in this draft.
I'm right there with you. Love the pick. And I do think that offense becomes a backfield split of Wright and Chase Brown rather quickly. As much as I think Zach Moss can carry workload, can help in a backfield, I just think that, you know, it'd be Jalen Wright's lightning more so, and Chase Brown can be, you know, a little bit more of the receiving role. I think Jalen Wright can do receiving, but I think that's how I'd shape up that backfield, because I don't think Zach Moss is keeping either Chase Brown or Jalen Wright off the field. So it comes down to, for me, those two would be at the top of the pecking order. Could be wrong. I love the pick, Nate. It was going to be my next pick, but I couldn't take him over, you know, a first round wide receiver. So I let the value slide down the board to you. But unfortunately, it is what it is. I went with another player in what I believe to be a pretty darn good situation, albeit a little bit of a later pick than I would expect for this player. Jalen Polk going to Dallas in the third round. Going to be a wide receiver too. Not a lot for depth in that wide receiver room at this point. Brandon Cook is still there, but over time, Polk is going to supersede him, pass him, whatever, get over him in the depth chart. And love the talent. A guy who I have said and will continue to say will fight a dude. The physicality is there. Ball catching ability is spectacular. Some of the best hands in the class. I think he's a solid enough route runner, and I think he's being pretty heavily slept on in this class. It's easy to do when there are so many exciting wide receivers to kind of get lost in the shuffle. I think Polk has been lost in the shuffle, and I think, especially going to Dallas, I think he'd be going pretty close to this range, maybe a little higher even, depending on who you have in your league and what people's beliefs are. But with that said, I was torn on this pick with the player that Mike went with, because I think this is a pretty appropriate time for this player to go. Mike, what do you got at 207?
Great player, and I like the landing spot better. I'm going JT Sanders going to the Los Angeles Chargers. Nate had mentioned before that their wide receiver room, not anything special until they get Marvin Harrison Jr., of course. Got Josh Palmer and what was supposed to be a very good first-round draft pick last year in Quentin Johnston. But JT Sanders comes in, and, you know, you did mention as well John Harbaugh's offense. Or is it Jim Harbaugh? James Harbaugh's offense, a little archaic, which means you're going to need a tight end on the field at all point in time. He comes out. He is a good blocker. He gets open. He's going to do everything very well that James wants him to do. It's going to give him opportunities. And I think realistically, he could be a starter rather quickly in this offense, in my opinion. So JT Sanders at the 207, right around the middle of the second round, sign me up all day. Nate, I love your next pick, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, like I said, this is the pick that I was between two running backs, and I picked Jalen Wright. Kind of upset I didn't get Polk or Sanders. I was hoping I could get Polk with my next pick, actually. I was thinking he was going to drop down the board a little bit, but Bob knows what's up. Bob knows that Polk's a really good wide receiver, and that's actually like a dream landing spot going into like the wide receivers 2 spot for Dak across from CeeDee Lamb. So I really like that for Polk. And then Sanders is a really good pick too. I like this. The middle of the second round in this draft is really good. And this is just another reminder, go get your second round picks now before the draft. This is a really strong draft class. We're going to have players you can add to your team and not just fill out your bench, but give you flex plays out of the second round. So we want to go get those second rounders. And I'm picking up Trey Benson, who went to Cleveland in round 3 at the 208. So Trey Benson, the Nick Chubb heir apparent. Nick Chubb coming off the ACL injury. I still think he's going to have a pretty decent season because he's just that good of a running back. But there's a good chance that he doesn't come back and be the same Nick Chubb that we saw before. So Trey Benson could quickly become, the spelling running back to Nick Chubb, and maybe Nick Chubb's only getting about 50% of the carries of the backfield and try and keep him fresh coming off the injury. There's a lot of potential for Trey Benson, a home run hitter in this kind of offense. Also, he's got some receiving ability too. So I think he quickly becomes the RB2 there and gets opportunities. And while this offense at times has been really good and other times hasn't, I don't really know what to expect with this offense. Trey Benson always gives you a home run threat. And at the 208, to pick up a running back with day 2 draft capital who has that kind of upside, once again, I feel like I'm picking up really good running back value here in the second round.
Can I just say one thing too? Nick Chubb is a free agent after this season. However, if he was a post-June 1st cut, it's only $4 million in dead money, and the Browns would save $11.8 million. He's not looking good or however they want to do it. So just a thought. I don't think they'll do it, but there's always that possibility. We see veterans get cut
always
that we didn't expect all the time. So if that's the case and you're getting Trey Benson at the 208, that's something that could end up being the steal of the draft right there. I think he could beat out Jerome Ford. What do you guys think?
I would say so.
I would think so as well. And I like Jerome Ford. No knock on him.
And I think, touching on into my next pick and my next couple of picks, in all honesty, I think that we are starting to see, and maybe it's just this class, but we've seen it over the past few classes where running backs are kind of getting buried on depth charts or getting lost in depth charts and taking like a year to break out like wide receivers used to, where it takes some time for these guys to cook on rosters. I think that's the case with Jalen Wright till he really, gets his sea legs, gets going. Probably takes that full year to see his full potential, and maybe you buy low later. Same with Trey Benson. If Nick Chubb does stick around or is sticking around, Trey Benson probably not going to be great year 1. Probably going to see flashes, and then who knows what happens. I think the same can be said for somebody like Braylon Allen going to, albeit I dipped into day 3 for this one. This was a top of the 4th round pick. I believed a lot in the landing spot, wanted to get in on running back. As the pool is kind of dwindling, in my opinion, for really good draft capital and landing spots. So I wanted to get in on it. I still like Braylon Allen as a talent. I think that in this system, albeit not a great overall landing spot in terms of situation with how that team is built right now structurally, but the talent going to Carolina, they add a lot of pieces in this draft. I'm a fan of that, and still a fan of the talent of the player for what the role I expect him to have is. So took him here going to Carolina. I think he can beat out Chuba Hubbard at this point and the ghost of Miles Sanders. So whether that happens year 1 anytime or not, again, young running back as well, one of the younger running backs in the class, buying him early to hopefully reap the rewards late. Maybe took him early in this draft, but that is A-okay. Mike, I like your next pick a good bit too. Talk about it.
But at the 210, he was the 47th overall pick to the New York Giants. I'm going with Michael Penix Jr. And at the 210 in this part of the draft, you're getting what could potentially be a long-term quarterback 2 or at worst case quarterback 3 for your fantasy team. There's been rumblings of the Giants brass saying we regret the Daniel Jones extension. Sometimes players get extended because it was just the best option available at the time. Maybe they didn't like the draft class. The free agent pool wasn't very good, so they extended him. But the fact of the matter is Daniel Jones has missed time in the past. Michael Penix Jr. could come in. Maybe he sits on the bench for a little bit. Daniel Jones not fully healthy, learns. Daniel Jones gets hurt or just really sucks, which is always a possibility too. Penix comes in and flourishes. And at the end of the second round, This is good value right here. While I'm not the biggest Penix Jr. fan, opportunity is still talented. Good value. I'll take it. And another guy getting great value this late in the second round. Nate, who's your next pick?
Yeah, no, I like the pick, Mike. You know, you can't pass up on a possible starting quarterback this late in the second round. It's just a good value pick, especially because you don't usually see second round quarterbacks go into such a wide open quarterback room. And I know Daniel Jones is there, but we know just situationally that is a wide open quarterback room.
Yeah.
At the 211, I really struggled with this pick, to be honest, because I thought that we had kind of lost our tiers. We don't really have any day two running backs left at this point. There was only 3 day 2 running backs in this draft, Wright, Benson, and Brooks. So at this point, if I want a running back, I got to start getting the day 3, which you guys know I'm a little bit more hesitant about those running backs. But there's still some good wide receiver talent on the board. Some guys that got question marks, but good draft capital. So I went ahead and got Xavier Legette. He was a 33rd overall pick to Carolina. He goes in there. He doesn't have to be the wide receiver one. That was one of my worries about Legette. If he goes in the draft and has to go somewhere where he's expected to be the wide receiver one right away, I don't think that's going to be really good for his development. I don't think that's going to lead to him being productive right away. But him being the wide receiver 2 across from Deontay Johnson, I like how those guys match up and complement each other's skill sets. Carolina is also a young offense that doesn't have a ton of expectations going into this season, so kind of takes some of the pressure off. You know, Quentin Johnston last year, to kind of make a parallel of a wide receiver getting an opportunity where he maybe isn't ready for it. There's a lot of pressure on the Chargers last year, especially with Brandon Staley, trying to keep hold of his job. And then with Keenan Allen going out, Mike Williams going out, the pressure fell to Quentin Johnston. I don't think that happens to Legette in this situation. I think that lets him flourish and develop continually. So I like this pick. I think there's some good upside with Xavier Legette being a second-round pick that early in that kind of offense.
I committed another cardinal sin of Nate drafting. I dipped into day 3 running backs again.
Good.
And I went with 4th round, going to Baltimore's backfield behind Derrick Henry. If this landing spot were to happen, I know I could wait on this pick more than likely with how the community feels about the guy in general. But I want to get Bucky Irving on my squad anyway, because I think this is where he should be going in drafts, because I believe in the talent, super efficient, super great ball carrier, can receive the ball as well, can catch the ball reliably, can be used in a lot of different ways, can fit into an offense a lot of different ways. And we saw last year, not saying it's going to be the same offense in Tennessee that is now in Baltimore, obviously, but we saw last year Tyjae Spears spelling Derrick Henry. There's no reason that's not the case again, especially if they have a running back come in my opinion, of Bucky Irving's skill set that can play a change of pace role to Derrick Henry in this case. Spoiler alert too, Derrick Henry's not gone this year, but he is not going to play forever. As much as it kind of seems like that way now, it's not going to play forever. So again, buying in on a running back, albeit again, you could draft him a lot later in drafts, in all honesty. I just want to make sure I got him because I was sick of not getting players I wanted. So I took him here, got him on my team. Going to let him cook for a little bit. At this point in drafts, I'm not looking for starters anyway. If you're looking for starters at the end of the second round, you're doing it wrong. If you want a starter using a second round pick, a late second round pick, go trade for a older running back like a James Conner. Go get somebody like that. If you want somebody that you can plug in right now, that's kind of what you should be looking to do. With that said, before we get into the third round, let's talk about the best available players that are still left on the draft board. We got some round 2 guys, some round 2 wide receivers still kicking around. We had Keon Coleman go to the New England Patriots. We had Roman Wilson go to New Orleans. Ricky Pearsall to Cincinnati. Devontae Walker to Philly. Jalen McMillan going to New England as well. Brendan Rice going to Las Vegas. Jermaine Burton to Arizona. Javon Baker to Jacksonville. And Theo Johnson to Washington rounds out the day 2 picks. Then we're at the top of day 4, but we'll get into that as we go if we need to. But Mike, you're on the clock at 3:01. What do you got?
I do want to just say, Bob, you made a great point. If you're drafting for starters here, you're doing it wrong, unless you took over a really bad team, you sold off your capital, and you got, all you got was late second, early thirds, and you're just trying to plug and play so these guys can play a little bit and maximize value. You move on from them. That might be your only option. But look at me over here looking like a closeted New York Giants fan. Remember how I said you can turn things around in one draft in the NFL and fantasy? I'm going back to MetLife. I'm taking Marshawn Lloyd going to the New York Giants. They need a running back. Look, Devin Singletary's there, and I like Devin Singletary. But Marshawn Lloyd is a much bigger and more powerful back. And he's no slouch in the receiving game either. I think he's a guy that could come in and take snaps away from Devin Singletary immediately. And I think by probably about the middle part of his rookie year, he would be the starting running back for the New York Giants. And like I said, look, they got Malik Neighbors. They got Michael Penix. They got Marshawn Lloyd. That's how you improve your team. And apparently I'm a massive fan of that because I drafted all three of them. So Marshawn Lloyd at the 301. I think that's great value as well. Nate?
Yeah, I think it's great value. You know, I've been picking up Marshawn Lloyd like an auto draft at the end of the second, most of our rookie mocks.
Yeah.
So I think at the 301, with this kind of open running back room that he went into, where he's obviously going to be able to complement and work with Devin Singletary, great opportunity here. You actually sniped me because I was looking to pick up Lloyd with my next pick. But I had to pivot. I had to get a different running back, and surprised that this guy made it, but not too surprised because I know how we all kind of feel around here. But with the landing spot, Blake Corum going in the 4th round, but to the Los Angeles Chargers, back with Jim Harbaugh. Like, it's a match made in heaven. We know that Jim speaks so highly of those Michigan players. He speaks so highly of J.J. McCarthy. He speaks so highly of Blake Corum, two of the biggest leaders on that team. So Blake Corum goes here. He's going to work really well with Gus Edwards. Not going to get a ton of touchdowns because Gus Edwards is going to be the goal line back, but Blake Corum, really good vision. They're going to build that offensive lineup, and Blake Corum's is going to fit what Jim Harbaugh wants to do. So I think you're getting a really good value for a day 3 running back here because of the opportunity and the situation with that connection.
Yeah, I love that pick, and oddly enough, you sniped me because of the snipe by Mike. So good on you, Mike. I guess I had to begrudgingly take the value here that was given, and because I'm telling you what, Keon Coleman going to New England at pick 34 just feels like it's a busted pick. Just feels like, you know, gets thrown into a wide receiver room with nothing going on, gets thrown into a quarterback situation with nothing going on. In this draft, they addressed quarterback. We didn't pick him, so I'll mention him. They picked Spencer Rattler in the 4th round to go in and play alongside Jacoby Brissett, maybe take over. There's some upside in that pick, but certainly not a fix like Drake May or Jaden Daniels even would have been. So I am, you know, again, taking a swing on what I believe is some upside here. And again, taking a swing on how I feel people will draft in drafts as well. Because I don't think an early day 2 pick like Keon Coleman, that I know people who like Keon Coleman adore Keon Coleman. And I get it. I see the upside, but I see a lot of flaws in his game too. But at this point in the draft, I think he's gone off the board. So I needed to right some wrongs, I guess you could say. But Mike, you're righting some wrongs here at the 304. What do you got?
You didn't have to begrudgingly take Keon Coleman, Bob, when you could have taken Brendan Rice going to the Raiders.
Do it.
Devontae Adams getting older. Got Jacoby Myers. To the guy in the YouTube comments, earmuffs, we're talking about Jacoby Myers. And they got Trey Tucker. I think Brendan Rice could come in and could beat out Jacoby Myers. Could beat out Trey Tucker. I think not really a slot guy so much. Probably play it if he had to. But this is, again, a pick where I'm not anticipating him starting for me at all in the first year. At the 304, I'm drafting him. He is going right on my taxi squad, and he could just hang out there for a year. Till next year, I think they'll probably have to cut Devontae Adams loose. And then Brendan Rice, he should get his shot there. I think the Raiders are a really good spot for him. Sit and learn a little bit. Good opportunity for the future at the 304. I love it. And Nate, I'm not a fan of your next pick because I'm not a fan of the player overall. Sorry. But who are you taking at the 305?
Look, I think so at the 305, I took Ricky Pearsall, who I understand the three of us, we're not really big on Ricky here, but I still think Ricky is a good wide receiver. I just didn't see him as like an early 2nd round pick like some people on Twitter have been seeing him as, like a top 6, 7 wide receiver.
That's fair.
I do think he probably is pretty close to like that, getting into like the top 10 wide receivers in this group, though. I think he is a good route runner. He's got really, really good hands. And in this situation, he goes at the top of round 2, or about the middle of round 2, 49 overall, to the Cincinnati Bengals to fill that Tyler Boyd role. That's a good offense. I want a piece of that offense in the 3rd round. I get a good wide receiver who will get some production this year. And then when T. Higgins moves on, there's an opportunity for Ricky Pearsall to be the wide receiver 2 for Joe Burrow and across from Jamar Chase. How can you pass it up in the 3rd round? Even if he just sits at the bottom of your bench the entire year, he gets the opportunity next year. And I think we need to be patient with some of these wide receivers, because look at a guy like Nico Collins. For us, he's a top 12 wide receiver in Dynasty now. One of the most productive wide receivers this past year. and now has an incredible quarterback. Took him 3 years to break out. Not all these guys are going to break out their first year. And now there's a lot of guys that don't break out their first year and then don't break out again. But if you're picking them up in the 3rd round, be patient. There is opportunity for these guys to get better. They don't all just have to be really good their rookie year or nothing. So a guy like Ricky Pearsall, maybe he doesn't have, or Brendan Rice even, maybe they don't have that great production year 1, but there's opportunity outside of that and for them to develop and grow.
And I went with a running back who I think can develop and grow in the Kansas City offense, albeit on day 3 again, going after a day 3 running back yet again. But I'm in the 3rd round. I feel a little better about it. And I feel like, it's still only the 6th running back off the board, 7th running back off the board. I'm taking Will Shipley, who's still a relatively young running back as well, only played 3 years in college, so isn't like some of the older running backs in this class that I have gripes with. But at the end of the day, I'll take Will Shipley. I'll take his receiving repertoire. He's going to slot in and not overtake Isaiah Pacheco, at least not right away. Isaiah Pacheco's only on contract for 2 more years. They could extend him very well. I'm not going to rule that in or out at this point, but Will Shipley will find a role in this offense if this is indeed his landing spot, because they need somebody to fill in for Jerick McKinnon and what Clyde Edwards-Helaire had been maybe envisioned to do, but never lived up to. Either which way, Will Shipley slots into this offense, and I think he ends up being a flex play for you sooner rather than later, and sooner than people think. So I love the pick here at 306, one of my favorite day 3 running back picks. But yeah, that's where I'm going at this pick. Mike, you went with the day 3 running back as well. What do you got?
Yeah, I think I'm the only guy who took anyone from the 5th round, if I'm correct.
I think you'd be correct.
I think so. Yep.
Going to the Arizona Cardinals with pick 138, that's Ray Davis. And do I think it's crazy drafting a 5th round day 3 guy? Well, hey, Kyron Williams proved to be pretty good for some people that draft him and stashed him. What?
You do not get to pull a Kyron Williams pro from after slandering him in the last video. You don't get to do that. You don't get to
Kyron him. I was selling high. I was selling high.
Like
okay,
me.
well, even if I was slandering him, look, he had a year where he sat, and then he had a really good second season. The same thing could happen. James Conner is going to be 30 soon, and he's only under contract.
Ray Davis is going to be 30 soon.
But he'll still get that 1 contract then. And look, all Ray Davis has to do to get snaps right off the rip is beat out guys like Amari DiMercado, DJ Dallas, Michael Carter, and Tony Jones. And I think he can do that. He's good between the tackles. He's a strong runner, and he is an above-average receiving back as well. And again, look, ladies and gents, if any ladies watch this, it's 307. I'm not drafting him to be a starter. Taking Ray Davis at the 307. You can hate it all you want, Bob. That's fine. I love this pick.
I like this pick too, Mike.
I don't even hate the pick. I don't hate the pick. I just don't feel right about you justifying it by saying, hey, Kyron Williams was a late pick and he panned out, but F that guy. I'm selling him because he's never going to be anything beyond this year.
My point of selling him too was my lack of long-term belief in the Los Angeles Rams overall. Stafford's getting older. McVay had mentioned that he had thought about quitting at one point in time. So
we all have.
Yeah.
I don't think McVay is quitting anytime soon.
I wish I could quit my full-time job right now and just do this all day, but can't.
Not yet. All right. So at the 308, I'm continuing to pick up value. I got another round 2 wide receiver off the board, and that's Roman Wilson going to the New Orleans Saints. Like Pearsall, I've Roman Wilson graded out about the same. For me, kind of more like a 3rd round pick, but both these guys went in the 2nd round and to great opportunities. Roman Wilson going to the New Orleans Saints. He's the wide receiver 2 next to Chris Olave. I know Rashid Shaheed is there for, I think, 1 more year, but Roman Wilson is a very solid wide receiver. I think he lacks some of the upside that other people have seen in him. I don't think he has the upside that some of these other wide receivers have, especially physically, but I think he's a very solid wide receiver and fits like with Chris Olave pretty well as just good route runners who can catch the ball well, stretch the field if needed. I think it might be even a little repetitive to Chris Olave, to be honest, but if that's what they want to work with, I think that can work with the Derek Carr-led offense. So Roman Wilson at the 308, you're getting a flex play probably. So I don't know why you guys let him go this far, but I'll take the points. I'll take the points. It's fine. I was probably picking at the 112 anyway, but I traded my pick to Bob. So
if I was picking and I only had 1 pick in the draft, I'm not going to pick Roman Wilson when I already have Chris Olave everywhere. So
that's true.
That was my reasoning. I
don't have Chris Olave like anywhere, unfortunately. So I got to get myself some Roman Wilson.
Sucks to suck, I guess. But you get the sloppy seconds. But I went with a wide receiver who I like, who I think I wouldn't be surprised to get better draft capital than people expect come draft day, because I think he is a pretty undervalued player because of the injury he sustained and time he missed over the course of this last season. Jalen McMillan going to the New England Patriots in the 3rd round, albeit. And, I don't like Keon Coleman from a rawness perspective, but he had the slightly earlier draft capital, but we've seen it in the past where later round picked wide receivers do even better than their earlier drafted counterparts. And the thing I like about Jalen McMillan is I think he's really pristine as a route runner. I think he has great route running abilities. I think he can be an awesome elite slot at the next level. And slot players do pretty well, especially at 309. I think I'm getting a good value. I hope like heck they find a quarterback solution sooner rather than later. But that's my downfall. I'm siding with the talent on this one, not the situation. I like Jalen McMillan at this point in drafts. Mike, who do you got at 310? Your last pick?
I love the 309 pick with Jalen McMillan. My one concern about him, not as physical as I'd like to see him be, but in the slot in New England, I think he's going to get some targets. I guess he's going to have to fight Demario Douglas for those targets, right, Nate?
Yeah, I mean, good luck.
Good luck to you, Jalen McMillan. Bob, that was actually who I was hoping to pick at the 310, but
too bad
I didn't. So I took Javon Baker, who I like as well, going to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Jaguars depth chart's a little, I don't want to say packed, but he's going to have to get around Christian Kirk. He's going to have to get around Gabe Davis. That being said, get him on the field. I think he could shine. It's not going to be much the first year or two, but at the 310, welcome to the taxi squad, Javon Baker. He's got some good speed. He's got some good burst and really good ball tracking and hands too. So I like this for a late 3rd round pick. Have fun in taxi purgatory until it's time for you to shine, Javon Baker.
I mean, he's a day 2 wide receiver, so he might not be on that taxi for very long because he probably fit in as a top 3 wide receiver in that offense pretty quickly.
And if you're a good team too, and you're picking at the 310, and he does something on the field, and you can maximize that value and move him for somebody who's more productive now, I would gladly do that as well. So I'm trying to get to the point where, okay, I like a player, but I can't get too stuck on them. If I can move him for someone more productive that helps me win games right now, I need to start doing that on a more consistent basis.
Yeah, you get Javon Baker at the 310. He gets on the field as the top 3 wide receiver for the Jaguars. Makes any noise at all. And you probably can flip him for a 2nd round pick. So, you've made your money right there. Yeah. At the 311, I picked up a wide receiver, another 2nd round wide receiver, just picking up those guys here in the 3rd round. I can't believe it. Devontae Walker goes to the Philadelphia Eagles at the 53rd overall pick. And while this pick doesn't seem super exciting for me from a fantasy perspective, he does slot as the wide receiver 3, but that's behind A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith, who are going to get the vast majority of those targets and production of that offense. But Devontae Walker, I think this would be an incredible pick for the Eagles from an NFL standpoint. His ability to stretch the field and open up that offense for those other players would be really well used. Like you're talking about Quez Watkins, much improved when you go and get Devontae Walker for that offense. And then just being a part of that offense, I know we saw it be pretty poor at the end of last season, but with some positive regression, I expect this offense to be a bit more of what we saw at the beginning of the season going into next year. So Devontae Walker still would have opportunity for some big games. You pick him up in the third round, you put him at the bottom of your roster spot and see what happens. At worst, you just picked up Jamison Williams at the 311.
Yeah, you could do worse. You could definitely do worse. I think the addition of Kellen Moore to that offense should help dramatically. The biggest concern for me was being the wide receiver 3 in that offense. Like, he probably should go earlier than he has in this draft, but like realistically, what great upside are you hoping for?
60 targets is what the wide receiver 3 position got in Philadelphia last year, and that's between Julio Jones, Quez Watkins, and Olamide Zaccheaus. So if he comes in and he's the straight up wide receiver 3 as a rookie getting 60 targets.
Yeah, but with how he's used, 60 targets probably equates to about 40 catches.
True. If it's 40 catches for 560 yards and 2 touchdowns at the 311.
16 yards per catch. What are we talking? Talking like 640 yards? That'd be pretty crazy, actually.
At the 311. And if he does that as the wide receiver 3, you could probably
You're never going to know when to start him.
Yeah, it's going to be like very random.
Because there's going to be somebody that wants him then. And if you never know when to start him on a team that's drafting at the 311, you could flip him for a late 2nd next year and then use that to keep moving up in the draft.
If that's the process, fine.
Yeah.
But I don't think at that point he's ever a consistent starter. And I think the biggest thing when you make some of these picks, and we touched on it, is having the expectation of what to do with them once you have them. Because, at this point in drafts, especially somebody who's that buried on an offensive receiving pecking order, that's tough. So knowing what to do with them and knowing when to flip them, because a lot of people are going to see that as some sort of breakout, and it's going to coincide with a game that Devonta Smith got 2 targets and no catches, and everybody's like, oh man. So with that said, I went to day 3 again because I want to get a tight end that I think is better than day 3. And I think, we've only drafted, there was 2 tight ends in day 3, or day 2, excuse me. That one being Theo Johnson, not who I drafted, and the other was Jatavion Sanders, who Mike drafted previously. Then obviously we saw Brock Bars go round 1. But I think this tight end class is so much better than what this mock in particular is giving it credit for. I went Ben Sinnott, who went to San Francisco in the 4th round. Not an awesome landing spot, but this is siding with the talent over the landing spot in general. Greg Kittle. George Kittle is not going to be there forever. Greg Kittle probably not either. But happily taking a shot on my boy. I think this is a perfect system for him to be in. A guy who can be utilized in a ton of ways. Gritty run blocker, gritty pass blocker as well. Loves getting his hands dirty in that facet of the game. One of the top rated pass blockers at the tight end position in this year's class per PFF. Talented. I think there's an awesome opportunity here. Obviously, you're looking long term, but you're looking long term with tight end anyway. You shouldn't be expecting year 1 production, especially at this point in drafts. Tight ends have a strange way of finding their ways to roles. It's not always an early pick that leads to a definite quick start. Sometimes you got to wait. You got to sit and wait and add him to the tight end taxi squad farm that is on every one of our rosters. So that's who I went with at my last pick, getting into some of the best remaining players of this draft real quick. And I just want to have I'll go through round 5 because that's the latest we drafted a player. And that, that's 15 players. If you had a taxi squad, one person, I want to know who it is. So we had Jermaine Burton go to Arizona, round 3. You had Theo Johnson go to Washington, round 3. Round 4, Jamari Thrash going to the Jets. Audric Estime going to Las Vegas. Why get, you already have Zamir White at home, but why not go get him in the draft, I guess. Jared Wiley, tight end, going to Philly. Luke McCaffrey, wide receiver, going to Denver. Malik Washington going to Houston. Michael Pratt goes to my good old Green Bay Packers. Cade Stover, I'd be so mad. But Cade Stover.
Another weapon for Jordan Love.
Better back up than Sean Clifford, I'll say that.
I don't know. But then we got Tip Ryman going to New England. Isaiah Williams going to Washington. Bub Means going to Atlanta. Isaiah Davis to Denver, running back, that is. Jacob Cowing going to Cincinnati as well. Another pick that it feels kind of lateral to go get him when you already have a Charlie Jones, kind of similar-esque vibe to me.
I agree.
My good old boy Taj Washington getting some respect here, going round 5 to Indianapolis.
So you can back up Josh Downs.
We can back up Josh Downs. Well, that was my comp for him too early, and I'm like, well, I guess why not? Mike, your boy Dylan Johnson going to the Los Angeles Rams in the 5th round. Then we have Isaac Guerrero going to Minnesota, running back. Devin Leary, quarterback, going to New Orleans. And Zach, I know you're listening, watching, and loving this video. Tyrone Tracy going to New Orleans, and I know he's going to hate that because he has Kendre Miller. So everywhere. So who is one guy of the remaining that you would like to taxi squad stash if you can?
Mike, we know who you're going to pick.
Well, it's hard for me. The easy answer here is Theo Johnson.
Sure.
I think he probably has the clearest path to playing time, but I also really like Jared Wiley and Luke McCaffrey as well. But if I'm only picking one, I'm going with Theo Johnson. And hey, listen, I do want to say, keep your eyes open for Bub Means. I did a little digging on him, and I really like what I see with Bub Means. And Atlanta, there's some room there.
Yeah,
there is. Make some noise.
Yeah, I thought you were going to go Dylan Johnson, Mike. Yeah, I know you're a big Dylan Johnson fan, and there's, if you're slandering Kyron Williams,
so you could
there's opportunity for Dylan Johnson. I think Theo Johnson's a really good pick. Going into a very open, wide tight end room with the Commanders, and with how athletic he is, all he's got to do is just get out there and they just got to throw him the ball, and he's going to make something happen. I wouldn't really taxi this guy, but I think Jermaine Burton in round 3 to the Arizona Cardinals is a really good pickup as well. I definitely thought about picking him up at the 311. I think he's a good wide receiver, but he's been really inconsistent throughout his college career. But at the same time, he did lead pretty talented wide receiver rooms at Georgia and Alabama during his career. Unfortunately, those wide receiver rooms never really produced. So he led underwhelming wide receiver rooms with lots of talent. It just puts you in a really weird spot with evaluating. But going to Arizona, where I talked about there's not a lot of wide receiver competition, he would fit in there and compete with Michael Wilson and Greg Dortch behind Brian Thomas Jr. So I think there'd be opportunity there. But outside of Jermaine Burton, maybe like a lower pick for me, I actually want to go outside of the first 5 rounds, and I want to talk about Eric All going to the Los Angeles Rams.
Love that. Love it.
He goes in the 6th round here, 209 to the Rams, who need a tight end. They picked up Colby Parkinson.
They got Davis Allen, man. They're set.
Got Davis Allen, and now they add Eric All just to the murky tight end room there. But I think Eric All, as long as he's healthy, could be the tight end 1 there. So that's a guy I would love to taxi. They would probably let him recover from his injury year 1. You probably wouldn't see a lot of production year 1. So you can put him on the taxi. In year 2, Eric All might be the guy in LA.
Yeah. I love that pick. Awesome. It's a great system fit too.
Yep.
One of the better run blockers I've seen. Huge IQ when it comes to run blocking. The health is going to be the biggest box to check. The Rams have been really good about picking up value late, and I think this would be another added feather in the cap of picking up value late. Was surprised to see Eric All go all the way in the 6th round, since I think the talent is a lot better. Guy that was always open at Iowa. But did he have a quarterback that could get him the ball? And then he did have some hands issues as well from time to time. But always open, always finding green grass anywhere he is, and will get very involved in the run game as well as a blocker. So I love that ad. I would probably lean, just because I think the best, like you said, Mike, the best path to opportunity is probably Theo Johnson. But somebody who I feel kind of cheating doing this, that because I didn't mention him when I did my recap, Spencer Rattler is still sitting around at the top of the 4th round, goes to New England, get a quarterback on a taxi squad that you can just kind of see, wait and see what happens, or see and wait what happens, I guess. But see what happens there. I like that pick. There's some wide receivers I like, but Jacob Cowan going to Cincinnati, Taj going to Indy.
Yeah.
Don't feel great about that. Dylan Johnson would be a consideration for me, in all honesty, of a player that I'd put on my taxi squad, even though he goes to the Los Angeles Rams. Probably a nice handcuff to Kyren Williams, who if you want to make a case for Kyren Williams, it's the injury history that plays a role for him. Missed a good chunk of his rookie season due to an injury, missed time during this stretch. And I missed this as well, and I think probably a lot of people have. He broke his hand at the end of the last playoff game they had.
That's right.
And that's, a lot of people are going to miss that or forget about it because there was no long-term impact. It was like at the very end of the game, they didn't play anymore because they lost that playoff game. So if you really want to knock Kyren Williams, I think the knock is the injury history, which makes me very interested in possibly picking up whoever they have as a backup. And Dylan Johnson, as much as I don't love the player or the prospect, he is so much better than anybody they already have there, outside of Kyren, in my opinion. So
I agree.
That would be somebody. And Nate, I love the Eric All pick. That's an awesome pull. But if you want to pull some mock drafts with us and hang out with us that much more, head on over to patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind. Get in that Discord server. Get in on some bonus podcasts as well for a free week trial. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Comment down below what your favorite picks were. Maybe some people we missed. Who would you stash on your taxi squad? What are some landing spots you were hoping for in this draft? But with all that said, we're going to get the heck on out of here. We'll see you in the next one. But until then, I hope that y'all have a good one.